I hate Hamas is that they started this war. Israel suffered a fascistic assault, but it's Israel that is being branded as fascist. Israel suffered a genocidal assault by a movement, Hamas, that was literally founded with the express intention of visiting genocide upon the Jews. And yet it's Israel that's accused of genocide.
Right, but what they are doing is very troubling, right? The bombing of Gaza, the destruction of how many thousands and thousands of homes, how many innocent people died, that's still very troubling. All of it is troubling, right?
In every single war, more civilians than fighters die. This is
but isn't this
proven
one
fact.
And extraordinary how quick it's happening as well?
It's very quick, but I think that the thing to bear in mind is that when people say that 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, the first thing to bear in mind is that that is a lower number than have died in other recent wars. The more important thing to bear in mind is that a large number of them, estimates say 30%, are Hamas fighters, though they are a member of the...
30%? Where have you heard that?
Well, I've seen people say that between 10 and 12,000 are Hamas fighters. But this is the problem. None of this information gets through, not even to the extent that we would then be free to discuss it.
Right. I think actually that's what Coleman said as well, right?
In this video, you will see Joe Rogan absolutely crushed pro-Israel military expert Brendan O'Neill for lying about Palestine, Hamas, all the suffering while blatantly defending Israel propaganda, acting like a straight-up paid agent of Israel. But our brother Joe Rogan didn't let him spit all these lies. Guys, watch this pro-Israel guy get destroyed by Joe Rogan in this debate, and please don't skip. Let's keep watching.
But they've killed far more people that are civilians, that are women and children in the bombings of Gaza than were killed on October 7th.
Yeah, war is hell. There is no question about that. One of the reasons I hate Hamas is that they started this war. And it's a war that no one wants. I certainly don't want it. Israel doesn't want it. The people of Gaza absolutely don't want it. So it's an awful, terrible thing. But I think... I fear that we are living through one of the greatest inversions of truth and morality of modern times, because what we have in the Israel-Gaza, Israel-Hamas conflict is a situation where Israel suffered a fascistic assault, but it's Israel that is being branded as fascist. Israel suffered a genocidal assault by a movement, Hamas, that was literally founded with the express intention of visiting genocide upon the Jews. And yet it's Israel that's accused of genocide. Israel suffered the worst act of terrorism since 9/11, the worst act of racist violence in a very, very long time, the worst act of anti-Jewish violence since the Holocaust. And yet it's Israel that's accused of enacting a new Holocaust. So it's a complete inversion, I think, in some of the coverage and some of the commentary of the truth of the matter. And, in terms of what's happening in Gaza, it's unspeakably awful. There's no question about that. But I think one thing it's worth bearing in mind is that this is one of the most scrutinized wars of all time, if not the most scrutinized war. I've never seen this level of scrutiny. And I wish I had, in fact. And I do worry that tragically normal things that happen in a war, which is that there are civilian casualties, in this instance are being blown up as proof of evil on Israel's part. That's double standard.
But that's not a justification, right? What Jose Andres has said is that they intentionally targeted his aid workers, and that he's gone public saying they intentionally targeted his aid workers. They knew what those people were doing and that they killed them. This is because that has happened in war before, and we didn't have the kind of scrutiny that we have today, in no way justifies continuing that practice, right?
It's not a justification, but it's an attempt to understand why there is this such intense scrutiny on this war in contrast to so many other recent modern wars. I think that's...
Recent modern wars, but with the kind of coverage that we have with cell phones and footage that's available everywhere, I don't think so. I don't think there's nowhere near the coverage. It wasn't an urban environment in the same way when they were in Afghanistan, right? Other than Kabul and some of the other... There's not that many high population areas. It's a completely different scenario in terms of cell phone footage and people being able to see the wreckage, fly drones over it. The capability technologically of covering it is very different, right?
I think that's true, but there have been recent wars where there was same levels of technology. The war in Syria, for example, which the Western powers were intimately involved in too, and the number of people killed there was absolutely huge, including Palestinians. Thousands of Palestinians died.
And what
in the
year
Syria
is this?
War. From 2011 onwards, right through till quite recently.
Don't you think there's a big difference between the amount of cell phone coverage available from 2011, especially in Syria, versus Israel and Gaza in 2024?
The point I would make, I think you're right. I think social media, the improvement in social media, or not, as one might see it, explains why we're seeing so much from this war. But it can't explain, in my view, the cultural interpretation of it amongst many in the woke West. And
right,
I think what's happening
in the woke West, support for Palestine is ubiquitous. It's it's part of the doctrine.
And hatred for Israel is ubiquitous.
Colonizers.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, Joe Rogan just destroyed this pro-Israel clown. What a win for Joe Rogan. This idiot came on the Joe Rogan podcast thinking that if he spit the lies from his paid Israel script, Joe Rogan would believe him and keep his mouth shut. But the guest got shocked and literally started crumble as Joe Rogan called him out. And what happens later in the video I can promise you that will going to make you shocked. Just keep watching, guys.
As the most evil state, the thing that worries me most is that Anti-Zionism, as they call it, I don't think it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israel, of course, just as it's not racist to criticize Zimbabwe or whatever. But we're not just seeing criticism of Israel. We are seeing hysteria about Israel, which I think is disproportionate and myopic and obsessive. And we're seeing it on the streets all the time. We're seeing it on campuses. We're seeing it on social media. This very myopic obsession with everything Israel does. And the thing that worries me is that what is presented to us as anti-Zionism is so similar to what we all recognize as the anti-Semitism of the past. It is undeniably similar. So in the past, what people said about the Jews is that they were uniquely bloodthirsty. They had their fingers in the pies of everything. They were controlling of our communities and our societies. They were a pretty demonic force and they're destructive of world peace. That's now all said about the Jewish state. The Jewish state is uniquely murderous. There was a line in a Guardian column recently which referred to the war in Gaza as uniquely barbaric. They're seen as uniquely murderous. They target children. They love killing children. They are all-powerful. They have this hypnotic influence over the United States and the United Kingdom and other countries. They puppeteer these nations. They're so powerful. And they are destructive of world peace. It seems very curious to me that all the things that were once said about the Jewish people are now said about the Jewish state. And I'm not saying that everyone who says it is a racist, right? We shouldn't throw around the word racist willy-nilly. It's an important word that has real meaning. But I do think there is an element of bigotry, whether witting or unwitting, in this singling out of Israel for the most extreme form of moral opprobrium that is not directed against any other state, including states that do far worse things than Israel is doing. That's what I find quite curious and really worrying about the times we live in.
Right, but what they are doing is very troubling, right? The bombing of Gaza, the destruction of how many thousands and thousands of homes, how many innocent people died, that's still very troubling. All of it is troubling, right?
In every single war, more civilians than fighters die. This is
but isn't this
proven
one
fact.
And extraordinary how quick it's happening as well?
It's very quick, but I think that the thing to bear in mind is that when people say that 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, the first thing to bear in mind is that is a lower number than have died in other recent wars. The more important thing to bear in mind is that a large number of them, estimates say 30%, are Hamas fighters, though they are a member of the...
30%? Where have you heard that?
Well, I've seen people say that between 10 and 12,000 are Hamas fighters. But this is the problem. None of this information gets through, not even to the extent that we would then be free to discuss it.
Right. I think actually that's what Coleman said as well, right? He did say 30%. The number, whatever, I thought it was 50%. I thought it was more than that, rather. I thought it was... it's hard to say, right? Because there's people that will tell you that Hamas over-exaggerates the number of civilian casualties. And then there's people that say that Israel will target anyone that even is associated with Hamas as being Hamas. And so they exaggerate their numbers as well. But at the end of the day, for sure, tens of thousands of innocent people have died, right?
A lot of innocent people have died.
Tens of thousands. But isn't...
Guys, can you just see this pro-Israel guy? Like, how cruel can a person be? Joe Rogan is literally asking him about the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. The thousands of civilians killed, the destroyed hospitals, and the journalists targeted, and the children starving. And this man still refuses to acknowledge even the basic fact. You can clearly see how uncomfortable he gets when Joe Rogan brings up Israel's documented human rights violations. Did you notice how long he took just to say yes to a simple question about Israel's cruelty? That hesitation shows everything. It shows how these so-called experts come prepared with a script to defend the Israeli government no matter what, even when confronted with undeniable suffering. Because let's be honest, the world has seen the footage from Gaza, entire neighborhoods flattened, families wiped out, international aid blockade, journalists and medics killed, and yet this guy still tries to spin it like Israel is doing nothing wrong. That's why people get frustrated, not because of politics, but because of the blatant denial of real human suffering. Let me ask you a serious question. Do you agree with any of the point he made defending the Israel government's action in Gaza? Or do you agree with Joe Rogan for finally calling out this pro-Israel guest with facts, refusing to let him hide behind propaganda? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your opinions. And make sure you watch until the end, because Joe Rogan dismantles his final talking points and exposes how weak the propaganda becomes when someone actually pushes back with the truth.
It quicker than most wars in the amount of people that have died so quickly. And most of these wars that you're talking about, whether it's Afghanistan or Syria, the amount of dead may be greater, but isn't it over a longer period of time?
That's true. This war is distinctive in some ways. Firstly, because it's in a very small area. Secondly, because we know that Hamas roots itself in civilian society. We know this for a fact. We know that it hides amongst civilians. We know that it disguises itself as part of those communities.
But that's what terrifies people, the willingness to kill civilians, knowing that you're going to kill civilians just to get to the bad guy.
But, you know, this is the thing that really worries me about in the aftermath of 7th of October. I said to so many people, so many friends of mine and people I encountered in media discussions, I said to them, what should Israel have done? Nothing. You know, they had just been subjected to the worst act of anti-Semitic violence in 70 years, more than 70 years. The slaughter, the butchery of entire families, the kidnap of hundreds of people, the murder of old people, women, men, children. What should they have done? And when people say, well, they shouldn't have gone into Gaza, they should have just relaxed a bit, or whatever people say, what they're essentially saying is, you know, Jews, let yourselves be killed. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. It was only an incursion into your territory and a slaughter of 1,000 people. Why are you so het up about this? No society would put up with that. If an anti-American force came into the United States and killed whatever the equivalent number is, it would be tens of thousands if we took in population differences. No one, I hope, would sit back and say, well, you know, whatever, it's fine, it's not a big deal. Israel had every right, I think, to pursue the terrorists that did this to its people and to pursue them with extreme prejudice and to put them down and to say, we will create a situation in which you will never be able to do this again. And of course, what's happening is awful, but the moral responsibility for it lies entirely with Hamas. They started this war. They're now refusing to end the war by giving back the hostages and surrendering to Israel, which is what they ought to do. And they're openly rejecting ceasefire options. So this absolution of Hamas, this absolving of Hamas of any responsibility for the calamity currently befalling Gaza, I find that very worrying too, because among some woke activists, there seems to be this view that Israel is the only actor in that region. It's only Israel's decisions that matter. And we can't possibly expect these brown people in Hamas to have any responsibility for what's going on. There's a curious paternalism to that. The truth is that Hamas is fundamentally responsible for what's happening, firstly by starting it, and secondly by refusing to end it.
But if you're talking to people that are reasonable, their objection is not that Israel defend itself. Their objection is the sheer number of innocent people who die by virtue of these strategies of just attacking populations where Hamas is embedded with civilians and killing all the civilians. And their objection is not that, you know, that Hamas is good, is that the Palestinian people are innocent and that they're trapped under the ruling of Hamas and have been since, what, 2006? How long has it been?
Yeah.
That's not you're killing people that have nothing to do with that. You're killing people that are captured by their own government. You're killing people that virtually have no say in how their government is run. They have no say in what Hamas does if they decide to go across the border and kill 1,200 people. They didn't want that to happen. They didn't ask for it. They didn't participate in it. But yet they're getting bombed into smithereens. And this is the argument that the reasonable people have, is that, okay, you're not absolving Hamas from starting this, but are you absolving Israel from killing thousands and thousands of innocent people in the process of hunting down Hamas? And are you creating even more martyrs by doing so? Because how many people are losing family members? How many people are facing starvation? How many aid workers are getting killed while they're trying to help? At a certain point in time, you have to look at, is this the only way to do this? And you have to say, you're not absolving Hamas, but you are showing compassion for innocent people that are trapped by this murderous regime, and now they're getting blown to smithereens because these people embed themselves with them, and they create, you know, the human shield argument, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a good argument. I don't know if it's a moral and just argument for a superior society. If we really are morally and ethically superior, the idea of killing tens of thousands of innocent people to get to a few bad people, or how many bad people, who knows what the numbers are, right? But that disturbs the shit out of people. And when they find the numbers are grossly, it's like, what are the number of women and children that have died? It's a high number, a very high number. And they don't take comfort in the fact that they died by getting bombed instead of being invaded and butchered in their homes. They're dead.
But you know
what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do
it's
know
like
what you're saying.
Both things need to be taken into consideration. And when we're discussing this, it's like people have this ability to like sort of compartmentalize and not look at it in an overall. Like, if you took an overall assessment, you'd say the whole thing is horrible. But just because one horrible thing happens, it doesn't justify all this other horrific shit that's going on as well. Both those things kind of need to be addressed. And is that the only way to do this? The only way to do this is to kill tens of thousands of innocent civilians in order to get these bad people?
What I'm saying is that what I'm saying is, I think, twofold. The horrors of war attend every war. That's a given. Every war is horrible and sick-making and hellish. That's a given, I think. But then there's another issue, which is the question of why a war is being fought. Is it being fought for criminal reasons and wrong reasons? And I think there are many examples of that, spearheaded both by your country and mine over the past 100 years. Unjust wars that led to unjust deaths. Are there also wars that are just and that are worth fighting? Yes. The war against Nazism, I think, was a just war. I think I can think of anti-colonial wars in which it was completely justifiable for people to rise up against British rule or American domination or whatever else it might be. So we do have to make a moral call on what's happening in Israel and Gaza. And that does involve rising above the differences in the numbers killed. It does involve rising above the horrors of war and trying to take a broader view which says, do we want Israel to continue existing? Do we want the Jews to have their own homeland? And do we want them to be safe from the fascistic menace of a neighbouring army that would like to kill them all and to destroy their state from the river to the sea? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. And if our answer to those questions is yes, then we do have to accept Israel's right to pursue Hamas. And then the blame for the horrors in Gaza has to lie at the feet of Hamas, which is with profound cynicism.
Here, Brendan O'Neill keeps framing this war as if it started in a vacuum. He talks as if Gaza wasn't under blockade for 17 years, if Palestinians hadn't faced repeated bombardments, occupation and displacements long before October 7th. That's why his argument collapsed. They erase the suffering of millions of innocent civilians instead of acknowledging the destruction. Neighborhoods flattened, families wiped out, children killed. O'Neill hides behind slogans about self-defense and tries to make Palestinians' death sound like a footnote. Joe Rogan didn't let that slide. He kept bringing the conversation back to the human cost. Are Palestinian civilians supposed to just be background noise? Do their life do not matter equally? O'Neill never answered that. He couldn't, because once you face the humanitarian truth, the starvation, the bombings and the displacement, the children dying, the whole Israel can do whatever it wants narrative falls apart. Joe Rogan exposed that clearly, asking the question millions of people around the world are asking, is this really self-defense or is it collective punishment? Can Israel defend itself without killing civilians? And here's where I want you to jump in. Let me ask you some questions and you guys answer them in the comment section. Do you think Brendan O'Neill actually believes what he says, or is he just punishing a narrative? And also, whose side made more sense to you, Joe Rogan or Brendan O'Neill? And also another question that is very important, what part of Brendan's argument collapsed fastest for you? And also, do you think Western media is honest about Gaza, or they shape the story to protect Israel? And also, if you had Joe Rogan's mic for 30 seconds, what would you say about Gaza and at the same time Brendan O'Neill? Let me know in the comments what's your thoughts. I would really like to know your point of view on this one.